everybody, and welcome to the Empowered CPA podcast. I am your host, Dawn Scott. Today, we are going to be talking about an experience that I went through last week, not only as me, the person, me, the business owner, but also me as part of a family that unfortunately lost somebody dear to them, and kind of what we need to do now to plan for the future, plan for the time where we make our glorious exit from this world, and what we can really do to help those around us who are trying to grieve, but also trying to take care of final affairs, and also have a life that they're currently living at the same time. So I want to make it very clear that no matter where you live, it's super important to connect with an attorney in the state that you're currently living in. And also know that whatever you set up now is not permanent in terms of it can always be changed as long as, you work with that attorney to structure it properly. But just making that first step and really setting your loved ones up for the easiest process possible. So again, seek legal counsel, but today's going to be a fun mix of my experience as a relative, and then my experience professionally in helping others kind of go through this type of family event. So, okay. So last week, my family unfortunately lost the matriarch on my mom's side. She lived a beautiful, glorious life. She lived into her 90s, and we should all honestly be so lucky. And so as most happens, right, there's buildup over the last little bit. Nobody ever knows when that day is coming. And so there's a lot of turmoil leading up to it. At least that was the experience here. A lot of emotions and a lot of these things. And so one part that is super important, and I think the first thing that we really need to talk about is no matter how old you are, it's really important to start the process and then finish the process of getting your affairs in order. So my first trust and will that I did as a person, I think I was 25 years old, maybe 26. And it was not a fun process. And I'm pretty sure I had a lot of cocktails once I was done. But it's so important because going through that process really helps you articulate what is it that you want. I always thought, oh, my mom will know what to do if I get hurt, or my mom will know what I want if something happens to me. But to be honest, that was a really selfish way to look at it. And it was more, I didn't want to talk about that. So when we think about our life in a legal perspective, there's a medical power of attorney and a medical directive that instructs people close to you on what your wishes are. And then there's a financial component, which is basically the rest of your life. And so we were fortunate. My grandmother had a very clear medical directive, very clear in what she did want, what she didn't want. And so when, my family was faced with, this is kind of where we're at, what do you want to do? There was no arguing. There was no speculation. There was no internalizing what should we do, because she made it very, very clear what her wishes were. And that takes a lot of guilt and a lot of emotions away from the people who are making that decision, because as people, we always want to do what's right. And sometimes that's just keeping somebody around. And if that's not what they want, then it's important that gets put into the conversation. So for me, as the person, I went through with my attorney who just had a baby, but I'm going to have her on as soon as she recovers from that process. And she can speak in a very articulate way about all this, but it's important to go through these different scenarios and say, this is what I want, this is what I don't want. And it's kind of like a checklist for those people that you love the most. It's like, I know that I'm putting you in a bad position, right? I'm putting you in a position that nobody ever wants to be in. So let me set you up for success by telling you what I want so that there's never any doubt. So thankfully my grandmother did that. And so, she peacefully went in her sleep, which was such a blessing. But had that not been in place, I think there may have been some turmoil, as with any family, over, well, I think she wanted this and I think she wanted that. And that's common, most families in highly emotional times like that. You just never know what's going to happen between family members. So that also, those directives also help make sure that you're all on the same page, and there's no opportunity for anything other than making sure that person is taken care of in that moment. So when we talk about kind of the next phase, I can talk from a family member perspective, and then I can talk, on the professional perspective. What follows next is generally the part that is hardest for most families, for several reasons. You're grieving the loss of a loved one. So everybody grieves differently. Everybody handles stress differently. Everybody's estate is left in a different state. Everybody's estate is in a different place, and finances are different for everybody, and everybody's motives are different. And a lot of times when somebody passes, a lot of the historical relationships and interactions have an opportunity to change based on kind of how that person controlled those situations. So when somebody passes and it comes time to handle the actual estate, this is also where it's so important to have those documents in place, because then me, the granddaughter, I'm calling the attorney who's clearly listed in the trust. We all had a copy of the trust, which was also incredible. And I could tell right away exactly what she wanted. And there was no gray area. It was, I want you to do this, this, and this. And honestly, those being laid out allowed some amount of grief to be still processed while we were still processing this, because we weren't trying to speculate as to her last wishes. So from the financial perspective, we were following this beautiful path that she had laid out for us. And so it really, if a family member dies without these in place, we go into what is called probate, which basically means that there is no clear direction. So then you find that your family is not only grieving you, but also completely unable to do anything with any of your assets or liabilities or anything that you own, because a court is now going to decide what happens to everything. And so it really adds a lot of extra stress to those people who are trying to take care of your last everything. And now they're having to do all of these extra steps. And, a lot of times when I am speaking to younger clients and their business owners and their parents, the first thing that I generally, top 3 things that I talk to them about is, do you have a trust? Do you have a will? Do you have any idea of what that looks like? And generally speaking, people are like, oh, I can't do that. Like, it's so emotional. I'm so nervous. I can't think of my end of life. And as a mom, I'm here to tell you that there's no feeling that I can have on this earth that would counteract the thought that if I didn't have a will, my children would go and be ward of the state until the state figured out what to do with them, right? So if you have young children and you pass and your partner passes, unless you've named officially some guardian, there is a very high likelihood that even if it's just for a little bit of time, your children will not be with the loved one that you want them to be with. So I can tell you firsthand experience, making a will and making a trust is awful. And it's, nobody likes to think about the end, but I mean, if nothing else gets across today, like if you hear nothing else, if you love your children, which I think we all do, at least name guardians. Make sure that while your child is grieving, because, if there's a guardian involved, this is a very untimely passing. Make sure that guardian is named, because otherwise your children are going to be floating around in some system. And that is an awful thing to do just because you don't want to have a hard conversation. So very minimum, get that handled. because that is a really challenging position to add to an already hard situation. So when we get into the nitty gritty, say you have a will or you have a trust and there is some clear direction, one of the things that is very common especially in older people, is there's severe privacy around all of their accounts. So no one really knows where all their checking accounts are. No one really knows where all their retirement accounts are. No one really knows anything because that was just kind of the way of the times of the older generations. On a positive note, most of them still do get paper statements. So if you try hard, you can generally find most of them. But one thing that you can do today to really help those tomorrow who are dealing with your estate is to lay out, this is where all of my bank accounts are. These are where all my loans are. These are where all of my retirement accounts are. This is essentially, these are my assets. These are my liabilities. Should I die, here's a roadmap. My grandmother wrote out in her handwriting where everything was. And as the years went on, there's literally like cross outs and like notes and it's a very full piece of paper that streamed onto the back. But just having that and being able to follow some amount of, like a flow of where all of her things were made it so much easier for me to determine what was where and what needed to be done. And so I have that personally with my partner. I have an Excel document that he has a live link to so that he can see all of the updates. And I lay it out. I'm like, these are where, cause I'm in charge of the finances, in the family, cause I have control issues. And so he has a list of, here's all of our bank accounts. I put little notes about what we use them for, how they get funded, what they, kind of the purpose of them. And then the same with, when we have car loans or when we have brokerage statements or where our mortgage is, all of those types of things, including account numbers and contact information if there's a specific person that he needs to contact. Because I think that the difference between my grandmother's generation, which is primarily a paper generation, and my generation, or even, those plus or minus one for me, is we do everything digitally. My parents are a great example of this. My mom still has a checkbook and she still goes inside the bank to do her banking. And my dad does everything online. He literally gets no paper statements. He was a programmer, like an OG programmer. And so he's very comfortable in the digital space, and that's how he operates. And we have had many conversations about kind of this type of thing. And he's like, well, it's all in my email. I'm like, that's great, but your phone is like Fort Knox and I can't get into it. So I love that it's in your email, but unless I can actually get into your email, it doesn't really help me at all. Right. And so when we think about not only setting ourselves up, we need to also set those up coming behind us for success. So do you have something where you're like, oh, it's all in the safe, right? Like I grew up with a physical safe in my house but I don't know the combination to it. So really it's a big metal box that holds everything that's important and I don't know how to get into it. So for us, the workaround in my family was, well, so-and-so knows how to get into it. It's like, okay, so at least I know that most of what I need is physically located inside of the safe. And then, even putting down your passwords or your phone passwords, anything you need to be able to get into those things. If you're not willing to share now, which is fine, I'm not saying we share our whole world, but really think through, aside from, oh, it's in my email, how does someone get into your email? Well, they get into it through your phone or they get into it through your computer. Well, how the heck do they get into those things, right? And so setting them up for that to make sure that when they're grieving you at your loss, they're not also pissed at you, because those are hard feelings to reconcile, right? Like you can really love someone and you can be really sad that they're gone, but you can also be really, really pissed off at them that they left you in this position where you're now like a detective trying to figure out Sherlock Holmes style where the heck all your stuff is, because most likely there's somebody else who's going to be depending on either that income or those cash resources or, a co-owner of a home, and they may not be that up to date on where things are. Like if I were to die, my husband's gonna be like, I don't know where stuff is. but I've set him up so that, I've put into place, I trust this CPA. I think she will take fantastic care of you. So when I die, call this person and give her this document, and she will be able to track down everything that we have done so that you can grieve properly and she can handle my mess. And that's how I'm protecting him against, having to deal with all of those things at once. So, when we're thinking of these things, it's so important, and it's so easy to just be like, well, it's in my inbox, or it's in my online statements, or it's in my whatever. But you have to remember that only you know how to get into those things unless you share that with someone. And whether that be putting it into a physical location or putting it into, a safe deposit box and just saying, if I die, here's a key, or just making sure that you think ahead and say, in the case of this is what I'm doing to make this easier for you. I promise that, you can just get drunk when you're done doing it, because none of us like to do it, or, your drug of choice, but make sure that you have those hard conversations and you do those things to protect the ones that you love, because just not wanting to do that is not an excuse to not set those things up. And, I'm as guilty as the next one. I don't think I'm ever going to die, but I mean, let's be real. I probably will at some point. And when I go, I want you, to be talking about all the dumb things we did together and laughing and joking, not saying, where the heck did Dawn put all these things? That's not how I want to go out. So consider that, and just keep it updated and keep that conversation open and normalize it a little bit, because it makes it easier, and it makes it just a part of life instead of something that we put off until it's too late. The other thing that I think is so important, especially if you have small children or even just children at all, or, a business or a mortgage, really reaching out to those life insurance or insurance brokers in your ethos and making sure that your loved ones are set up. I deal a lot in death in my world, and I can tell you that nothing is scarier than watching a family deal with, either having a ton of money is sometimes a problem, but also not having enough. In the end, also adds so much stress. So if you can just ensure that your insurance products are matching the lifestyle you have, and they change and they alter over the course of your life. When you're younger and you have younger children, you probably have bigger policies because your cash reserves are less. And as you roll through your life, hopefully your cash reserves become more. So there is some ebb and flow in that, but really just ensuring that, you have those things in place so that when things are done and you're being tidied up, that things can be processed in as calm of a manner as possible. And it's not fire sale, Sherlock Holmes, where the heck are we? Fire sale. So make sure that those are part of your toolkit. And I promise that you'll be remembered better by those around you. And the thing that is also important is me personally, the business owner. My grandma was sick for a little bit, and so it was pretty stressful there in the last couple months, because it was in and out of hospitals, in and out of rehabs. We were never sure. None of us know the date we're exiting. So, it was a lot of stress building up to it. And then the day that it happened was literally this orchestration, and this is me personally, an orchestration of my personal life to ensure that I could get on a plane at such short notice to fly out to assist my family, not only just emotionally, but I bring some skills to the table. And so me, the business owner, was literally on a Sunday, which is the day she passed, which is what she would have wanted for sure. I'm moving all my meetings for the week. I'm looking at what's due that week. I'm packing for weather that literally goes from like 50 to 85. Like, that's a lot of packing. And I'm trying to make sure my kids are taken care of. My husband works full time. So, I'm blessed to have a lot of people that are really helpful nearby. And so I'm doing all these things as me, the business owner, trying to keep my business. I have a small business. I'm trying to keep this afloat. I'm, doing all those things, but then also me the family member, like I just lost a matriarch in my family. And so that's a grieving process. And then, I took essentially an entire week off of work. I am fortunate. My clients are wonderful. And so I just told them, hey, I lost my grandmother. I know that I owe you this, but it's probably not possible. So I need a little bit of grace on that. And so that is something that was important and is important to know, because if I just said, hey, I'm going to be out for the week, I think that my reception would have been different for my clients. But being honest with them and just saying, hey, like I'm going through some stuff. I'm not on a beach somewhere in Bali. I'm helping my family get through a tough time. Like, can you extend me some grace? That's one of those times where I think that just being honest is key. And so clearly communicating what you need when you need it as a business owner, especially in these times, is very important. And then just knowing, like, I've been back for, 4 days now, and it's been pretty chaotic because I have not only tried to come back from a very, very stressful week personally, but I also didn't work for a week. And so just having the awareness to say, like, I can't do this all at one time. I'm still grieving the loss in my family. I'm still trying to take care of an estate. And I'm trying to do all these things. So, in normal times, I may have been able to say I can get all of these things done this week, but acknowledging that this isn't a normal time, and that's okay. In my field, no one dies if you have to wait another week. So acknowledge that as a business owner, because you are grieving on multiple levels. So nothing wrong with that, but also something that needs to be added to your planning. When we talk about your will and your trust and your kids and life insurance, if you're a business owner, that's a whole nother beast that needs to be addressed, end of life type situation. So, if I were to die, my business, there's policies and there's procedures. My assistant knows where they are, but 3 years ago, that wouldn't have been the case. I didn't have those things in place, and so when we think about even just life events, right, it's important that there's a document somewhere or there's knowledge somewhere to where if something were to happen to you, there could be a transfer either of information, a communication sent out to somebody, to everybody, and really just thinking that through. And again, nobody likes to think about the end, right? Like nobody likes to think that one day you could just not be doing what you're doing, and you can't come back to give instructions. So even if it's something that you visit once a year and you say, these are all of my places where I store documents. So in my case, accounting, these are where all my documents are stored. This is my client list, and these are all their contacts. This is where everything that they possibly could need would be. That is not only respecting those that are your loved ones, but it's respecting the people who are your clients or the people that you serve, so that in the end, they're taken care of, and, it's just a cleaner process, and it's nothing that we ever want to think about again, but it's so important. And it's something that gets overlooked because, I'd rather talk about marketing like any other day and digital assets and photo shoots and really anything else than me dying. But it's something that can't be ignored. So I guess my overarching thoughts on the process is really, while no one wants to do it, you have to go to a lawyer and you have to get these things drafted. Even if it's just to take care of your kiddos, or to tell your loved ones, identify the loved ones who are people who can make those choices for you, so they don't have to see you suffer. They don't have to worry they did the wrong thing. Give them the peace that they did what you would have wanted them to do. But also, you as the relative, set those relatives up for success. Tell them where your things are. Tell them how you want them to divvy things up. I've seen numerous families ruined over money. And everyone says it's not going to be them. And I promise you that money brings out the craziest things. And nothing ruins a relationship in the end, like finding out how someone really feels about you in the end. So set those things up and do those things right, and let your family know that you care about them. And from time to time revisit them and make sure that's still what you want, you know. My parents redid their will when I was, 35, and I was still the guardian of my little brother who's in his mid-30s. So, you know, update those and make sure that they're current, and just know that that's part of adulting, and it's part of being a responsible part of a family. And it's also going to really, really help your loved ones grieve properly so that they can remember you, how you'd want to be remembered, you know. And I actually put it in my will that I want an open bar at my funeral, and I want you to tell the craziest stories of the dumbest things we did together. And I hope my mom precedes me because she's not gonna care for that. But I know this is a heavy one, but it's so important, and I promise I'll get a lawyer once she's recovered from babies to really talk about, you know, more intricate details. But seek out that counsel and get the process started. I promise you'll feel so much better once you do. As always, thank you for joining me today. It is always such a pleasure to have you here. You can find us on Spotify, Apple, or anywhere else you enjoy your shows.